Hello, my name is Greta Harrison. Welcome to Born Fabulous Podcast Season 3, Episode 10. The theme of this season is young adults with intellectual disabilities living full lives of independence and interdependence. You will hear interviews with parents, support staff, and of course the young adults with intellectual disabilities. Please note these interviews were done 1 to 2 years ago. Achieving independence is a complex journey for many individuals and families. There were many stops and starts with various entities when putting together Season 3. Regardless, this content is very relevant, and we hope you will find it helpful. This episode is the second of 5 parts with Janice Fialka and Richard Feldman. Though they both say they are retired, Janice and Richard continue to be sought-after presenters and speakers on issues relating to disability, inclusion, building community, advocacy, and much more. Janice is also the author of 4 books and a poet. Richard and Janice are the proud parents of Micah Fialka-Feldman, one of the stars of the film Intelligent Lives. Micah has an intellectual disability. It was a real treat to have this in-depth discussion with both Janice and Rich. Now, please enjoy this short clip of Love is a Potion. The lyrics are by Melissa Riggio, a young lady who had Down syndrome and was the focus of episodes 1 through 4 in Season 1. The music and voice are by Rachel Fuller.
But the 3 principles that guided us were great expectations, education is a lifelong process, and we didn't mean schooling. And third was, how does the community change? Not how does Micah, quote, overcome, but how does the community change to create more opportunities? So we spend a lot of time talking to a lot of the community.
Wow. I think an additional piece, and because maybe we've been activists pretty much from the 60s, initially I saw sort of disability as a special ed issue, right? I mean, I had a sense of integration, but then various people, including Norman Coons and many other people, introduced me to this whole a little bit of time. We didn't know, like most of us, that there was any such a thing as disability history and culture and activism. It certainly, people who were living it knew about it, but we didn't know that the longest sit-in ever of a federal building occurred in 1977, where people with disabilities sat in for 27 days. Which I know your viewers and readers know, and if they don't know, about the incredible film called Crip Camp. But not knowing that it influences what people didn't do. So Micah was able to be part of a youth with disabilities leadership experience when he was in 11th grade. And that was really life-changing because he began to see that it wasn't that every disenfranchised group has strong people who do bold things. So when he was in college through, a special program, and he wanted to move into the dorm, and the university said no, to our almost amazement, he said, well, I'm going to fight this. I deserve to live in the dorm. And so it's not just Micah knowing that. He had the context that people with disabilities have protested, sat in, demonstrated, got arrested. So our call out is make sure that in your office buildings and educational settings that we celebrate and honor and recognize that rich history.
Very important point. Very, very important point. And Micah Micah and you all did fight back against that. And then he moved to Syracuse and had his wonderful, wonderful experience there that led to his great job that he has now as a teaching assistant and a place that he loves.
Yes,
so
yes.
Thank you for that. Well, yes. I'm going to organically go to the Syracuse, and I'm going to go out of order from what questions that I originally had and go to what he's doing now at Syracuse, because he's a teaching assistant for Syracuse, where he did earn a certificate in disability studies, which is documented in Intelligent Lives. And he has had a strong circle of support there for a very long time, which we'll talk, I promise you, we'll talk about circles of support. But while he's there, he has made some changes. He has a new living situation. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges COVID raised was how do we create with Micah a more organic relationship with other people. He has a staff, he has a circle. A lot of it was Zoom, and it evolves as well, his circle. It's been 10 years, 10 years this week. Martin Luther King Day is when he moved to Syracuse. And as we often say, he spoke there in August of 10 and a half years ago, and said, I want to move here because they get me here, because they have done such good work within disability studies and inclusive education as an institution. So we decided to buy a house, a duplex, and we have no desire to be landlords. But Micah and his support person live upstairs. And our goal is to rent out the downstairs to people who have a commitment to relationship building and community building with Micah. And it may be a family, it may be long-term students, but not just do it for a rental per fee. And they just developed a beautiful flyer that would be another resource that we'll share. And if anybody out there knows people in Syracuse who are looking for downstairs, beautiful 4-bedroom place, we'll do whatever we can to make it hospitable, as long as they're caring, concerned human beings. So we're trying to enlarge his immediate circle to have, dinners more regularly, as well as his circle and as well as the staff. So creating another entity for those relationships of community building.
So he's living upstairs and he has a roommate, right?
That's correct.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that it's called a live-in support person. So it's some, more casual support to Micah, and so there's somebody else in his apartment there. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Micah often talks about brokers. And
Mm-hmm.
when he first started doing this, I always think about a stockbroker, But then I realized not too long into it that he's talking about maybe case managers or that type of thing. But he's very aware of, who's helping him, and he's grateful. He has a lot of gratitude. Is the broker the case manager, so to speak? Is that who he means?
There really isn't a case manager. She definitely provides some of that support and collaborates with Micah, and but she's that's a term I know I struggle with as well, but it's sort of becoming known in the field, an independent broker. So she's a link to the fiscal agency that does issue the checks for his staff. But the so she does some of that. I think the circle does some of that. We intervene or support that experience as well. And what I want to do, especially for people who are listening to this, because it can sound like everything is in place and we know what we're doing. And this is really hard work. I mean, anything that's good and effective takes work and conversations. Things might, the circle, really incredibly wonderful people and thinkers and doers. But like any relationship, I mean, Rich and I have been together for over 40 years. It takes it's the ebb and flow, and it takes time. We've got to, hey, it looks like maybe the circle is sort of waning a little bit in energy. So let's pull people together and have somebody come in and think about it. So I really think I want to make sure aren't listening going, oh my gosh, I could never do that. I mean, we think that too of ourselves, but so I wanted to emphasize the importance of work as well. Yeah, so
So I think the question of Micah has a specific organizational relationship to his services. And I think to look at it historically, on the one hand, people created institutions, governments created institutions, then they freed people from institutions, created group homes, and then the struggle of have the money follow the individual has been really the mantra of Centers for Independent Living and the most advanced thinking within the inclusion disability movement. How do people live in neighborhoods, in community, and the money that the government provides through Medicaid or Medicare be used and decided by the individual? So she is not part of an agency. Right. So they've gone from institutions to agencies to something they're calling brokers. And these brokers, Mike is not only his own guardian, he's the person who hires the staff. She provides the support for that. She provides support for the budget. She's accountable to him, but also knowing self-determination with someone with an intellectual disability means you have to be very clear on the time it takes to have full discussion and what the options are, and learning how to be supportive and listen to that conversation between the broker and Micah and his staff. And that's complicated. I think that's part of the complication that Janice is referencing at this point. So he makes the decisions with support. He has a staff that will take him to medical places, will take him, shopping, cooking, working on his checkbook, all that kind of stuff. And at the same time, he has a circle which talks about the much larger relationships that he has. Where and how do I find a girlfriend? How's things going in my job? When do I ask for a raise? Different questions like that. So he has lots of people. This is a challenge, lots of people. And so they come and go.
It's always evolving.
That was the word. It's always evolving.
It's always evolving. Now let's talk about his circles of support, because what I think has you stand apart from most people is you started so young. And I have watched you present before, Janice. So I want you to just touch on, briefly how it was in, elementary, middle, high school, because I remember you talking about pizza parties, and how it changes, So if you could please start on that.
Yeah, well, when we've learned about it from folks like Jack Pearpoint and Marcia Forrest, it just made a whole lot of sense because people were friendly with Micah when he was in first, second, third grade. Hey, Micah, how you doing? But they weren't necessarily friends. And so we learned the importance of bringing people together intentionally, kids together. And so the social worker went into the grade class and talked about why do we have friends and what are friends about, just a conversation, and then went back the next week and said, Micah wasn't in the second session, and because kids they knew that Micah had, I don't know what word they used, probably special needs, but had some differences. And he said, we want to be able to support Micah to be able to have, to be active in recess time and do things after school. And so sometimes, so if anybody wants to join a circle that would meet with Micah once a week and have fun, that's really important. I mean, that's what it was about, fun. Who wants to? And in second and third grade, everybody wants to, right? But so he picked a diverse group of kids and they met regularly. And basically it was to have fun, who's going to play kickball this weekend and who's going to wherever, So it was, again, intentional in helping, because Micah wasn't, he was engaged with people, but he didn't always know, was he present, with what was going on. The best example I can get is that the kids were irritated because Micah, who didn't have a lot of words, would often poke people to get their attention like this, and, people kids, adults too, would sort of just ignore or go away. And that's not helpful in the long run. And so they role played in the circle, not just Micah, but what do we do when someone does things that we don't like? And then they actually role played, kids doing this, and Micah sort of knew what was going on. He knew he did that. It was a way of connecting. And so the kids said, okay, Mike. And so they came up with the strategy that when he did do that, they would put their hand up to be like a stop sign and, count to 5 or, a minute or something like that. We'll get to you later. So it works some of the time, but the really big lesson that I always say is that Micah knew that group cared about him, and the group knew that they could talk about the difficult stuff. And that's critical, because when people don't and they hide it or move away from it or ignore it, it doesn't get better. So we recruited parents to be involved. I wish I would have done that earlier. They were excited to do that. They helped plan parties. Again, I always say, people would sort of be involved and then not be involved. So we had to be active engagers and work with staff too to help things move along. After high school, we were more able to engage, or we had to intentionally engage more young adults who were out, no longer in school or were in college. So, you asked me questions if there's more specific kinds of things that you want, but Micah, for me, I was always looking for who should be in the circle, especially in elementary, middle, and high school. And I remember seeing one young woman who was on the cross country team, who was she was the navigator of relationships and had wild hair and wild socks. And I said to the social worker, I think she should be in Micah's circle because she's just got that personality and could draw other people in. So that did happen, and she was part of it. So those are some things to share about the circle.
Just a few others. I think the theme of breaking the silence is really, really important. That while, as Janice continues to emphasize, the conversations are often difficult. You don't know whose toes you're stepping on or who's listening, and it's risk. It's standing up at a curriculum night and saying your children may come home and say there's a student in our class who I'm not clear what he's saying and he doesn't look like he's reading. That's our son. And, when educators are not allowed to, there's these privacy stuff, so they don't know how to talk about any of this stuff. But so the parents have to come forward and say, I want you to know that if you have any questions, please come to us. So it's opening up that conversation. And a great example is, knowing that the same students don't go on forever. The same friends don't go on forever. But if we made a list of how these other students were impacted in their lives to become disability justice lawyers, to be teachers that created circles of friends, to be cancer doctors who now know how to listen more clearly and closely to their patients who have disabilities. And I think parents, professionals need to understand this is not just about our kids. This is about changing the world in which our children happen to be the catalyst and the sparks to open up the eyes and the hearts of other people, and not in any kind of pitiful way, but in what it means to be human, in the humanizing spirit of what this is all about, in the beloved community of what Martin Luther King talked about. And the last example is how Micah knew his circle of friends at college, at Syracuse, which had started all around the university and would meet at the university, after 6 or 7 years was getting a little old. And he was now having more friends in the community or in different places at the Jewish Center or at the credit union or Planned Parenthood. And so he organized and he initiated and organized, I need a renewal of my circle of friends and a person-centered planning session. So we had a full day and there were like over 35 people there. Now, the numbers are significant, but I want to what Janice says. It starts out small and it just keeps going and going. And we don't know where it goes. We know that you just got to keep asking these questions because that's how they change and that's how we change. And that's what security means.
You know, I just want to say one thing because it's on my mind is that the other important critical part of the circle and seeing what's happening is that Emma, who's the sibling who will most likely be around when we're not, sees and is that she's not alone in that. So the ripple effect is long term, and so I wanted to emphasize that because so many parents, struggle with that issue as well, rightly so. So
what happens when we're gone, and what? But can I add one other thing since you brought up Emma? We all know that the siblings have extra layers to their character because they are a sibling. And when we have true, authentic inclusion, those extra layers go to all the surrounding students in the class. That's why inclusion benefits everybody, which is, I know what you were saying, in society. So you have all of these professionals or productive citizens in society that are graduating and taking that into the world. I can think of many now who I know are going to go into politics and other areas, and they have they have those extra layers of empathy, character, and so many other things.
Thank you for listening to episode 10 of Born Fabulous Podcast 3rd season. I hope you enjoyed it and want to hear more. Some short video clips from most episodes are available on our YouTube channel and on bornfabulouspodcast.com. In episode 11, Janice and Rich will discuss Micah's upcoming book, The Movement from I to We, Thinking Outside the Box, Turnover and Support Teams, and much more. Please follow and like us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd be honored if you would leave a review wherever you heard this podcast. Now please enjoy this clip of Love is a Potion. The lyrics are by Melissa Riggio, a young lady who had Down syndrome and was the focus of episodes 1 through 4 in season 1. The music and voice are by Rachel Fuller.